Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I finally got done with my university projects for the quarter. I submit my final project today, and I thought I'd reward myself with some Go Battle League. I decided to sit down and play some Open Great League. And I know I've done so many videos on double grass teams before, but they always seem to work really well for me. And especially right now, water types are very common in the meta. You've got Whiscash, you've got Poliwrath, you've got Azumarill, Lantern. They're everywhere. Poliwrath is everywhere, especially in Ultra League. I can't seem to get away from it, and I am sick and tired of seeing Poliwrath. So I built an entire team that counters Poliwrath. I call this team the Please Don't Have a Poison type team. Yep, basically this entire team is going to be weak to poison types when Nidoqueen will destroy it, but it is a strong team and I haven't seen that many poison types. I did top left against a Toxapex, but it's okay, they're not that common. Against the majority of the meta and most of what I was seeing, this team performs really, really well. And I went on an absolute rampage with Shadow Venusaur and Whimsicott. And let me tell you, two fairy types on a team right now are very, very, very strong in Great League because of how many people are using Shadow Dragonair, Guzzlord, Poliwrath. You get the idea. The team is gonna be Azumarill on the lead with Hydro Pump and Ice Beam. I'm gonna need the Hydro Pump on that Azu for opposing Steel types because the backline isn't going to be doing amazing against some of the Steel types, especially Bastiodon and Skarmory. So Azu is going to be very useful for that Skarmory. I know Skarmory is technically going to be very good against this whole team, but I have been able to win against it with the Azu. Shadow Venusaur is going to be your safe swap to draw out any potential flyers that the opponent might have, and then once you've drawn out that flyer, hopefully you can take it out with the Azu, and Whimsicott will be able to sweep in the back. If they have double flyers, unfortunately you won't be able to win that game, but not all games are going to have double flyer. Also, not a lot of games are going to have poison because of how common Whiscash is. And then Whimsicott is going to be your closer. I do start off running it with Grass Knot, but then I do switch it to Seed Bomb. I think you can run either one. It can work out for you. You do get to that Seed Bomb a little quicker, but Grass Knot is going to be doing a lot more damage. I should also mention that this team is also extremely core broken by Abomasnow, but again, it's not that common. But that's enough rambling from me. I have some really nice battles for you guys. Let's get into them. Up first, we are going to see a Whiscash on the lead. Now, I am immediately going to swap into my Venusaur to draw out the flyer because a Whiscash lead will always have an answer to a grass type in the back. So we are able to draw out the Gligar here. This is actually not too bad for Venusaur because it is going to be part ground type, so it will take neutral from the Frenzy Plant. I'm going to go ahead and shield my Venusaur from the Aerial Ace because I was able to reach 2 Frenzy Plants, and 1 Frenzy Plant would be enough to take this Gligar out. So I was able to take both of their shields because they wanted to win the switch, and then my opponent does not let me farm the Gligar down with my Azu, or they don't let me throw the Ice Beam on my Azu. They go ahead and they swap into a Poliwrath, and this is actually okay here. I can go ahead, build up as much energy as I can before my opponent reaches their second Icy Wind, throw a Moonblast on the Poliwrath and take it out. And then I had enough residual energy to reach Grass Knot on the Gligar, take that out, and then my opponent only had a Whiscash left in the back. Whiscash can't do much to a Whimsicott, so my opponent top lefts. GG's to my opponent. Moving on to the next match, we're going to see a terrible lead of Shadow Victreebel into our Azumarill. Now, the game didn't let me swap immediately into my Venusaur. It made me do 1 bubble before I was able to swap out into Venusaur. Kind of annoying, but that's okay. We're going to be able to reach 2 Frenzy Plants against this Sableye. Now, either they have to let the second one go or they will give up both shields. They give up both shields, and that is a perfect situation for me. Now I can bring in my Azu and I will completely farm this thing down and have enough energy for an Ice Beam on this Victreebel. They go ahead and they swap immediately into their Victreebel, take that Ice Beam, and then I bring in Whimsicott and my opponent just top lefts. GG's to my opponent, and Azu Victreebel counter confirmed. Moving on to the next match, I'm going to be up against a friend and they lead Lickitung. I'm immediately going to swap into my Shadow Venusaur and we draw out a Shadow Gligar. Okay, we know that I'm going to be able to reach 2 Frenzy Plants. All I have to do is shield the first Aerial Ace and then I'm going to be able to reach that second Frenzy Plant, go for it, and I should be able to take both of my opponent's shields. Now I can bring in Azu and try to take this Gligar out. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to take 2 digs and they are going to hurt. Actually, my opponent goes for an Aerial Ace here, so I'm gonna have to take a dig and an Aerial Ace. Then I can go for that Ice Beam and take the Gligar out. Now, unfortunately, they still have a full health Lickitung in the back, and here I mess up so badly. I could have reached that Hydro Pump, or I could have pressured my opponent to throw their energy, but because I went for that Ice Beam, I gave my opponent an opportunity to farm my Azu down, and that is exactly what they saw they could do. They saw an opportunity to farm it down, so of course, this is going to end in a loss. For me, I played that so badly, and they have a Trevenant in the back, and Trevenant in the back without my Venusaur and without energy on my Azu is going to be very, very difficult to deal with. GG's to my opponent, and well played. On to the next match, we are going to see a Shadow Gligar on the lead. This is perfect. This is exactly where I want to see it. I'm going to go ahead and no shield the dig. It is going to hurt, but it's not going to be doing too much to Azu, which is very tanky. Now my opponent save swaps a Deoxys. This is going to be a bit tricky because I want to get it weak before swapping into one of my back Pokemon. Venusaur is going to be taking super effective from Psycho Boost, and Whimsicott is kind of squishy. So I weakened it with a Hydro Pump, and then I brought in Whimsicott, and this is where Grass Knot was a better option than Seed Bomb because a Seed Bomb would not have been able to take that Deoxys out. I would have had to take a Psycho Boost from the Deoxys. I was able to take it out with the Grass Knot, and then my opponent brings in Gligar. They shield against our Whimsicott, and then I can bring Azu back into the Gligar. I know that I can survive 1 dig, so I go ahead and I no shield the second one. I've reached that Ice Beam, but my opponent shields, so I bring in Venusaur because I recognize here that I can shield once and farm it down completely, and hopefully whatever they have in the back I can counter, and it looks like they were weak to Venusaur in the back. GG's to our opponent. And that's another positive set with this double grass team. I played 6 sets today in GBL, and I went positive in all of them except for one, which I got a 2-3 in. Moving on to the next game, we are going to be up against another friend, and we see an amazing lead of Guzzlord. Now my opponent immediately swaps into Vigoroth. I'm going to try to get the Vigoroth weak before I swap out. Again, my backline is very squishy, and so I kind of need to get either a shield out of the way or get the Vigoroth weak. I got a shield, which is good, so now I can bring in Venusaur. I can no-shield this Body Slam, and then if I can just reach a Frenzy Plant, I'll be able to take the Vigoroth out or take my opponent's final shield. My opponent decides to use both shields, so I'm going to go ahead and shield myself because I know I can reach another Frenzy Plant before the Vigoroth can reach a Body Slam, but this forces my opponent to swap back into Guzzlord, and now I can bring the Azumarill back into the Guzzlord and go for an Ice Beam, take out most of its health, and then my opponent is going to go ahead and take me out with a Crunch here, and then I can bring in Whimsicott and fully farm this down and have a ton of energy for whatever my opponent brings in next. Now, I was really worried that they would have a Poison type because Guzzlord is usually accompanied by a Poison type, but it turns out they are going to have a Defense Deoxys. They did catch that Seed Bomb on the Defense Deoxys. That's okay. I'm going to go for a Moonblast on the second move, and then I'm going to shield the first Psycho Boost. The second Psycho Boost is going to be doing a lot less damage. Gonna fully farm down this Deoxys, and then I win CMP over the Vigoroth. I can go for this Moonblast and KO the Vigoroth, and we take that win. GG's to our opponent, and they send me a little GG's on Discord as well. Moving on to the next game, we are going to see a Gligar on the lead. Again, very good lead for us. My opponent is immediately going to swap into Registeel. Now you're probably thinking that this team is weak to Registeel, but I can go for a Hydro Pump here, weaken it, and then swap into one of my back Pokemon. Of course, I'm going to swap into the Venusaur, and Venusaur and Whimsicott are actually going to be resisting all of Registeel's charged moves, especially if it is running Zap Cannon and Focus Blast. Now my opponent shielded the Hydro Pump, but I went ahead and I swapped into Venusaur anyways because Venusaur is still going to be doing a decent amount of damage to this Registeel. I'm able to get 2 Frenzy Plants off, and the Registeel is in the red now. They bring Gligar back in, and we're just barely able to reach that Frenzy Plant and take most of the Gligar's health out. They are in the red now, and we can farm them down with Azu, have a ton of energy for whatever my opponent decides to bring back in next. And they bring in their own Azu instead of bringing back in the Registeel. That's okay, I'm going to immediately swap into my Whimsicott because the Registeel is in the red. It is in Seed Bomb range, so I'm okay with swapping Whimsicott in now. Also, there's not much that the Registeel can do to me, so I'm going to go ahead and shield the Play Rough from the Azu, take the second Play Rough, and unfortunately we do get sniped here. They did have enough energy for a Focus Blast, so they take our Whimsicott out. Now I have to bring in Azu and just hope that this Registeel will not be able to reach a Zap Cannon before we can bubble it down. We're able to bubble it down, and then my opponent top lefts. GG's to our opponent. Moving on to the next match, we are going to see another Gligar lead. So many Gligar leads. Gonna go ahead and take the first dig on our Azu. Not gonna shield, of course. My backline is going to need the shields. And my opponent swaps into a Chargebug. Okay, this is a little bit tricky. The whole team doesn't really have a solid answer to this Chargebug, so I just bring in my Venusaur, I take the first X-Scissor, and I go for a Sludge Bomb. It takes his first shield. Now they're going to go for a second X-Scissor, and we go ahead and shield that one so that I can reach another Sludge Bomb. Now here, I wasn't sure if I'd be able to reach a third Sludge Bomb, but we do. We live with 1 HP. We're able to reach that Sludge Bomb and take that Chargebug out. I think if I hadn't lived that, this would have been game over for me. But we were able to take that Chargebug out, maintain alignment, and my opponent has a Poliwrath in the back. I am going to bring Whimsicott in against his Poliwrath, go for that Moonblast, take it out, and then Seed Bomb the Gligar, even though we don't need it because we have an Ice Beam stored on Azu, and Ice Beam is going to be double super effective against this ground and flying type. We're able to take them out and take that win. GG's to our opponent. And that win is going to give us a 4-1 set, putting us back in the mid 2,500s. I did fall a bit behind on my elo because I haven't been playing as much. I was busy with traveling and university projects and, you know, winter break, so I didn't get to play as much GBL as I could, and usually around this time of the season I'd be a lot closer to expert, or I'd already be expert, but that's okay. We're gonna keep pushing and we're gonna keep climbing. Now in this next match we get a Jellicent lead, so I immediately swap into my Venusaur and we draw out a Dragalge. Now my opponent goes ahead and shields the first Sludge Bomb, which is really interesting, but it looks like 2 Sludge Bombs would have taken it out. Now I'm going to bring Azu back in, and I am going to call that this Dragalge is not running Gunk Shot. We call it right, we take an Aqua Tail, thank goodness I didn't shield there, and my opponent immediately swaps back into Jellicent. That's fine, I'm going to bring in my Whimsicott and go for these Seed Bombs. Now I did go ahead and shield the first Shadow Ball. I wanted to maintain the health on my Whimsicott, and now I'm going to reach another Seed Bomb before my opponent can reach the second Shadow Ball. Unfortunately, they bait us with a Surf, and I shielded that, and they're going to be able to reach a Shadow Ball now and take most of the health on my Whimsicott off. Unfortunate for us, but I am going to save the energy that I stored on that Whimsicott and bring in Azu, try to take the Jellicent out, but for some reason they swap back in their Dragalge. We're able to take it out with an Ice Beam, and my opponent has a Trevenant in the back. I had so much energy on the Azu, so I was able to get the first Ice Beam off, and I'm able to reach a second Ice Beam to take the Trev out. The Jellicent is really low, so my opponent top lefts. GG's to our opponent. Moving on to the next match, we are going to see a Whiscash lead. Now in this instance, my opponent decides to swap out immediately into a Lickitung. But I kind of freeze here, and I don't know what to do. Usually the right answer for Lickitung is Venusaur, but I stay in with my Azu for too long, and I decide to commit to this decision. And actually, this ends up saving me because what I expected them to have in the back is nowhere near what I expected. So I was basically expecting a flyer because Whiscash with a flyer would make sense. But it turns out that that is not what they have in the back. They have a Trevenant in the back, and now I can align Venusaur to Trevenant. Venusaur against Trevenant is going to be doing very well. All I have to do is go for the Frenzy Plants. And actually, I can go ahead and take both of their shields here. I did have quite a bit of energy stored up on our Azu when I swapped out with it, so I know I'll be able to reach an Ice Beam on this Trevenant before it can reach another Seed Bomb. We're able to take it out with the Ice Beam, and now my opponent's Whiscash is going to be aligned with my Whimsicott, and there is nothing they're going to be able to do there. GG's to our opponent. About this next match, we see the Core Breaker, and, well, it destroys my whole team. We don't have to watch that. Moving on. In the next match, we are going to see a really nice lead of Shadow Dragonair against our Azumarill. I am going to stay in, of course, and take these body slams like a champ because Azumarill is super tanky. Gonna go for these Ice Beams, and of course I'm expecting my opponent to shield. We take their first shield, and then I'm going to let the second body slam go, and I want to watch out for if my opponent attempts to catch. They do attempt to catch on their Bastiodon, and I am going to go for a Hydro Pump instead. But here is where I mess up. After I threw the Hydro Pump, I should have immediately swapped into my Venusaur because then I would have been able to outpace to a Frenzy Plant before my opponent would make it to a Flamethrower. I needed that shield for later, and you'll see why. So we're able to take the Bastiodon out, and my opponent brings back in Dragonair. I am going to immediately swap into Whimsicott, and then my opponent brings in a Cresselia. Gonna go for the Moonblast. It puts the Cresselia in the yellow, and I decide to no shield here, thinking it was a Moonblast, but my opponent is running Future Sight. Gonna go for another Moonblast, and I really thought this would take this Cresselia out, but I go ahead and shield here because I have a little bit of energy left on this Whimsicott, and I really need to get my opponent's final shield out of the way. But unfortunately, because we don't have that second shield, I wasted it on that Bastiodon matchup. The Dragonair was able to take my Venusaur out with a Body Slam, and unfortunately, I'm going to take a loss there. And finally, moving on to the last game of this video, we are going to see a Lickitung on the lead. Now, I'm going to try to weaken it before I swap into my Shadow Venusaur. Gonna go for this Hydro Pump, and my opponent actually decides to shield this, so I am going to stay in here a little bit longer, and I attempted to catch a Power Whip on my Venusaur, but we're not successful in catching it. My opponent swaps out with a ton of energy on their Lickitung, but at least we're able to draw the Gligar out. We're able to take their final shield with the Frenzy Plant as well, so that's good. I can bring my Azu in now and take the Gligar out with an Ice Beam. Then they're going to bring Lickitung back in, and at this point I've decided that I'm going to save my final shield for my Whimsicott. Gonna let Azu go completely here, and I can bring Whimsicott in. All I have to do is go for a Moonblast against this Lickitung, but they make a catch on their Poliwrath, which is an interesting choice, but at the same time I see why they did that. There's not much they can do against a Whimsicott with shields down, so they sacrifice their Poliwrath there, and all I have to do here is go for a Moonblast against this Lickitung to take it out. Of course, we had a shield left, and one Body Slam was not going to be enough to take us out. So GG's to our opponent, and that gives us a final 3-2 in this video, and we make it to the mid 2500s. And that brings us to the end of our video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys learned something. And if you guys enjoy my videos, please consider subscribing. Maybe leave a like. It helps me out so much. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye!